All right. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining Nutanix at 9, the Freedom Edition. We'll maybe scream later, right, Mike? But
Yeah,
it's
I've got
good.
fireworks to go off later. I'm set.
Good, good. So turn your speakers down. It's going to be a loud one today. We are talking all about the flexibility afforded to you by Nutanix, and figure we will take you into July 4th weekend with our freedom theme today. So for those of you that have been coming out to check these out, appreciate the continued support and checking in with us again. If you're new to this, we'll kind of walk through what we plan to do today, and then we'll kind of cut to the chase and talk about all the flexibility you've got with the Nutanix platform. So like I mentioned, we'll do just some quick intros. We'll talk through who eGroup is, in case you haven't checked us out yet, but also Mike Dent, who's on the line. We'll talk about his background, and then myself very briefly. We'll take a look at actually what is new with Nutanix in general. We always want to make sure that if you are a Nutanix user, you can come here and find out what's going on with product updates. We'll talk about software updates, news around the company, and then we'll dig into kind of a different version of the Q&A today. As I mentioned, we'll be talking about a lot of the freedom afforded to you by Nutanix. So we've got hardware, software, and then we'll talk a little bit about public cloud choice, and hopefully take some questions live as we see them. So for those of you that maybe haven't attended a Teams Live event, you are able to submit questions. I'll do my best to keep an eye on it, and we'll kind of answer those on the fly as you throw them in there. So at any point, if you have questions on Nutanix, if you have questions on eGroup, hey, can you repeat that? Feel free to throw that into the chat, and we will certainly help out and kind of guide the conversation based on what you want to see today. So without further ado, I want to introduce Mike Dent. Let's Mike, you want to take your slide today? I feel like I've introduced you quite a bit. What's
Yeah,
anything new since 2 weeks ago?
No, nothing new since 2 weeks ago. I think we're pretty much status quo. I have changed my Hawaiian shirt. That's different from the one in the picture, so that's a little update there. Like I said, I did try to go for the Freedom outfit today, but all I had was the American flag karate pants, and that just wasn't going to work. On camera sitting down today, so I couldn't find a American flag shirt. So I just went with the Hawaiian shirt. Classic Nutanix at 9 attire.
There you go. Any plans for the upcoming July 4th weekend?
No, maybe going to Charlotte. Other than that, probably just going to lay low. It's been, as you know, Dan, we're hitting our end of quarter, so it's been hectic. So it's probably just a weekend to nice sit back and relax for a couple days.
Yeah, same here. And lay low is probably good advice with the fireworks going off in the neighborhood too.
Yeah, exactly. So. I let all the crazies get them out of the way. Exactly.
It's fun to watch. Yeah. Awesome. Well, Mike, it's always good to have you here, and looking forward to bringing your expertise to the questions and the content today. For those of you that don't know eGroup, just kind of a quick overview of who we are. We've been around for about 20 years, privately owned, debt-free organization headquartered out of Charleston, South Carolina. I'm looking forward to getting back down there now that travel's opening back up. I'm Dan Drude. I'm based up in Northern Virginia and cover like the DC and Virginia area as a sales rep. But eGroup, like I said, we've been around for quite a bit and have really kind of built this curated portfolio of technologies. It's a bit more focused than some of your big box shops. We tend to avoid the Sears Roebuck approach and have just really what we're good at and what we think is kind of the best defined solution for the data center, which is why we've got these Nutanix at 9 sessions going. And we've seen great success with this across a lot of the different industries that we work with. Really, if you are an organization that has high requirements around level of detail, you want to be faster than your competition, our portfolio is going to help enable that, and Nutanix is a huge piece of that. So if you have any questions on eGroup, feel free to throw them into the chat. Happy to, as the sales rep, talk about ourselves, as much as you want us to. But yeah, again, any questions, throw them in there. But let's get out of the intros here and dig into Nutanix news. So, Mike, there's a few things that I definitely am going to lean on you to talk about. But just as a company, if you're following Nutanix as a customer, if you are into just looking at tech stocks, I did want to call out that Nutanix, they hit their 52-week high. The chatter around Nutanix over the past few years has been, can they deliver? There's been a lot of, they're not profitable, things like that. But what we're starting to see is kind of what we've all known, that the momentum of the platform, the momentum of that technology is converting into something that's actually realized outside of just even the tech space. And so the significance of this is that Nutanix, probably about a year ago, really put a lot of effort into converting to a subscription model. That, if you want to dig into the weeds on it, there's plenty of news articles out there on various people and what they thought about it. But what we're seeing in terms of this kind of 52-week high is a lot of the sentiment changing around the company and actually starting to catch up and understand the vision of Nutanix, and that momentum carrying over, the subscription conversion going well. That's reflected there in that stock price. So none of this is financial advice. I think I have to say that in case the SEC is watching, but really just something worth watching and keeping an eye on as you kind of take a look at the health of a company and the actions that they're taking to grow. So wanted to call that out. Mike, I know we had some updates around Move and Era and maybe a few other things. You mind kind of walking us through that?
Yeah, I think the Move one was kind of one that flew under my radar. I knew some of the Era releases had been talked about, but the Nutanix Move 4.1 that was just released, it was released earlier this week, actually yesterday, 29th. Move, we've seen a lot of great things with Move over the last, let's just call it a couple of months to years, right? Of supporting a very simple migration from first ESXi to AHV, then Hyper-V to AHV, giving you some flexibility for then AWS to AHV and even Azure to AHV. But now we're starting to see some of that ESXi kind of love being thrown for Nutanix Move with the Nutanix platform. So now with 4.1 now releasing a Hyper-V to ESXi. So if I'm coming off a legacy Hyper-V appliance or configuration, going to a Nutanix cluster running ESXi, and now I can use Move to perform that simple kind of quick migration from that Hyper-V VM, so the VHDX that the Hyper-V runs on, over to the ESXi, the VMware format. So that's a neat, something I hadn't kind of thought about or a need, right? Since we've been focusing on Move with really kind of the predominant migration path going over to AHV. So that's an exciting one. I think kind of continues to open the doors, and it kind of speaks to the conversation we're having today, really, as well, right? It's some of that freedom. And Era, I think the first two on there for MongoDB support, it's just, again, Era continuing to broaden its support for database platforms out there, right? With Oracle SQL Server, Postgres, MySQL, now adding in MongoDB. Again, they're continuing that evolution, supporting a wide range of database platforms that we see all the time. Supports HA, right? So just as Era continues to grow, having a more resilient platform for it, again, always a positive. And then the Oracle Rack Restore. Honestly, I didn't know that wasn't possible today. It was kind of one of those that was tucked under the Era functionality that they supported Oracle from a database restore perspective, but now have announced Oracle Rack Restore capabilities. So again, if you're a Rack customer, now you've got some additional functionality and features with Era that continue to expand that product. I mean, there's been a handful of other releases out there, but I think those are kind of the big ones, right? We had another small AOS release last week. Some other kind of releases out there as well. Calm got an uptick. Flow Security Central, which is the Security Central and Flow migration coming back on-prem, that got another one. A couple of NVIDIA GPU drivers for AHV. So we're really seeing a lot of great traction from Nutanix in releasing some, not just releasing software, but releasing software that has making some big changes for customers, and it's great to see that. Yeah,
it almost sounds like we'll need to update this slide and kind of get a ticker running across the bottom.
Exactly.
As opposed to something static, right? It's So and for those of you that aren't familiar, right, Move, as Mike mentioned, that's the tool that, it's really a couple of clicks maybe to convert between hypervisors. A lot of customers have traditionally used it to go from VMware to the Acropolis hypervisor. So if you're out there considering, do I actually need VMware? Do we want to continue to pay the bill, or does my environment work on Acropolis hypervisor? I would say probably 80 to 90% of the time it does. You use Move, and that's an included tool within that to go ahead and make that conversion. But I think the value of, again, that freedom, right? They're not driving you to Acropolis hypervisor if you're not necessarily looking for it, if you're not comfortable with it yet.
Exactly.
Move from Hyper-V to VMware. It's pretty gracious of them, right, to be able to build something like that, given kind of the competition in the market and how they operate against some of the other products out there. But I think that's a great update to call out. And then Era, I mean, we've started to see groups that, the database is paramount. Build a cluster specific to your database, and you can add Era on top of that. It's an extra feature on top of Acropolis hypervisor, but being able to kind of leverage Era to make management, patching, availability all much more robust. I think that's a great update as well, especially on the Oracle side, because we know that can be tricky.
And one thing I'd say, Dan, is a lot of times we're coming into June, right? Summer's here, and some companies slow down with a lot of time off and vacations and things like that. I mean, if I just look at the announcements from Nutanix, and since the beginning of June, they've had 17 product release announcements, right? So they're picking up some steam with across, and this is across Prism Central, AOS. Just looking at it, kind of LCM for firmware updates, Objects, Calm, Move, Era, Security Central. I mean, we're seeing it's definitely something that it's not a moving target, but all the releases they've had here recently has been greatly kind of welcome and bring an impact, right? So that's great to see. I love seeing some activity there from them continuing to move that needle forward.
Yeah. Good stuff. And then final kind of call out, and we'll dig into this towards the end. But on the 15th, we are actually hosting a workshop. And I know it's going to be you, Mike, with Ron Trimble over on the Nutanix side. So if you are new to the platform or you want to get kind of a hands-on experience, we'll actually be talking about hybrid cloud and how to navigate Nutanix for both on-premises as well as public cloud, and how to build that as kind of a joint solution. So that's a bit of a news. In a sense, it's if you have questions on kind of what that is or how it works, we'll have more details on the bottom of the hour here at 9:30. But did want to call that out as well. But let's go ahead and start walking through. We're going to start with the kind of the freedom of choice in hardware today. I've got just 3 slides to tackle on this, and we'll go through those, and then we can actually pop into how to navigate this and how to check it out yourself. But really, I think the core component of Nutanix, right, is allowing you to have that choice. Most organizations, right, it's kind of an in-house. Hey, this is my offering. This is a Cisco offering. It's on Cisco hardware. It's run by Cisco, or it's a Dell solution. It's on Dell hardware. And formerly owning the VMware, right, it's going to have this hypervisor. Nutanix really, as they've transitioned and matured as a company, we've gotten away from what we'll talk about today, kind of that NX approach, where that was their primary appliance. So really, hey, we're a software. We're helping you build that software-defined data center. I think the NX line is worth a slide of its own, just because it is kind of the original platform that Nutanix was on. As Nutanix grew the company, they said, you know what, the best way to offer experience is from top to bottom. And so NX is what they designate their super micro appliance. So a lot of organizations, right, they've got their appliances, and it's typically on super micro. Super micro makes up a lot of the hyperscalers as well. And the NX platform would be what you procure from Nutanix if you were to buy everything from Nutanix. And that allows you to call into support. If it's a software issue, Nutanix is going to deal with it. If it's a hardware issue, Nutanix is going to deal with it. And I think from my perspective, at least, it's probably the cleanest experience. They've done a really great job with some other OEMs that we'll talk about here shortly, but it really gives you that single throat to choke. That's not cliche at this point, but it's really kind of that single experience to procure, build, deploy, and have everything managed and offered by one vendor. So I think from that perspective, it's worth calling out the NX line. Mike, anything kind of out there that you feel like mentioning on the NX side? I know we'll dig into kind of like different sizes and node types and all that in a bit, but anything at a high level?
Yeah, no, I think from the NX perspective, right? It's you touched on it, right? It's one throat to choke, but we see that with the other to some extent the other OEM providers as well, right? With Dell, HPE, Lenovo. I mean, I still have one throat to choke there. Yep. For the most part, right? There's still going to be the handoff necessarily from the software side, for hardware side, from either between the OEM over to Nutanix and back and forth. But I'd say from the simplicity, right? It's just it's as close to the center of Nutanix as you can get, right? Running on the NX side. Now, it's hardware, right? So you touched on it, right? We see a lot of appliance vendors today using Supermicro. I mean, Rubrik. Yep. I don't think Cohesity does. Unitrends, I believe, does, right? So if you take the bezel off a lot of these appliances that you see in data centers, a lot of them are going to look exactly the same. You can't tell who the vendor is, right? So I've heard knocks around. Well, it's Supermicro. It's not. it's maybe not the hardware vendor I want. But to our conversation today, cool. You're not stuck there, right? So again, from the NX perspective, I really like the node types they have. I like the styles they've got from a hardware perspective. But again, you're not locked in, and that's regardless of hypervisor. It's regardless of environment. Again, as the slide says, it's the OG, right? It's where we started with. But now, again, we've got a lot of options out there. I love the hardware, but I also love the other hardware that's out there as well. So again, I love not being tied to it specifically.
Yeah, no, good stuff, and we'll definitely dig through kind of the various platforms you can get into. The second, and like I said, there's kind of 3 stacks of the hardware offerings with Nutanix. The second tier is what you would call your OEM appliances, and those will stand out from the third party that we'll get into next. But when we talk about OEM appliance, what we mean is that these are validated solutions that have been built and are purposefully offered by Nutanix and their partner. And so you see 5 here. You might be sitting there, oh, well, I've got Nutanix on Cisco, or I've got Nutanix on another platform. And we'll dig into that in a bit. But what I really like about these, and you kind of touched on it, Mike, is that single throat to choke mentality. That's what you can get with this approach as well. So even though you've got a different hardware provider under the covers, the partnership that's been established between Nutanix and, say, HPE, for example, allows you to have that same support experience and really net all of the benefits that you would get if you went super micro. And I think this is important because in particular, you see some of the bigger names out there, right? HPE, you've got Dell EMC, Lenovo, Fujitsu, and Inspur. We don't see not as much as the others, but still out there. But say for example, you're a global organization. Maybe I was talking to a group that they're headquartered out of Germany, and the HPE contract is over there. It's based out of there. There's no changing on that. So everything needs to go HPE, no matter where you are, what you want to do. And so this partnership with Nutanix allows you to actually purchase Nutanix through HPE. And they've worked out the support agreement. They've built offerings. HPE specifically has offerings around like database as a service now. We talked about Era. So they're actually starting to incorporate more and more of the SaaS offerings that Nutanix provides into their offerings as well. And if there are specific features, maybe Dell EMC, you like really long quotes, right? I've always said they're kind of like the CVS of quotes, because you get 38 line items, you get 2 thank you for buying Dells, but right, maybe you've got a contract to buy Dell, or you're in Texas, so you buy Dell. But the the ability to kind of partner and have that ability to call Nutanix support, which is world class, and still also be able to consume the hardware that maybe you're contractually obligated to buy, I think that's a big thing there. And then also talking about groups like Lenovo, sometimes you get into these specific use cases where one provider's maybe got a better story or better supply chain than the others. And I think Lenovo, I call them out just because I've seen them be a bit more specific in their use case. But these are kind of what we would call like that second tier, right? Like same experience as super micro, and you just got a little bit more flexibility in how to procure that hardware.
Yeah, one thing I'd say, Dan, like a great example of this one is, here in the state of South Carolina, Lenovo has the Nutanix contract, just like you said with, the customer you were referencing with Germany and HPE. So one thing I've gotten to experience firsthand is kind of that handoff of when when we've got an issue, and I've worked with a customer several times on this. They had an issue, so we call Lenovo. And Lenovo does their triage and diagnose. Yeah, it's not hardware, so let's go ahead and let's get you over to Nutanix and let's get the software side. Now, one thing that I was absolutely impressed with was it wasn't all right, well, you need to call Nutanix now and open a ticket with them. The Lenovo agent I was with, the support person, basically said, give me 5 minutes. I'm going to go ahead and open a ticket with Nutanix, and we'll get this ball rolling. So they actually took the process of not having me call Nutanix and open a ticket. They did that warm handoff with Nutanix, and they actually stayed on the phone with us the entire time until we got the issue resolved with Nutanix, right? So and they followed up after the fact. So I thought that was about as good as you can get when I have 2 vendors involved as it would be if I was going with just Nutanix directly, right? And Nutanix support's amazing, right? Unlike, there's maybe 2 vendors I can think of that have that quality of support, but working with, HPE or Lenovo or some of these OEMs, that's as close as we can get to having that perfect support kind of involvement that we get with Nutanix. even there's a little bit of a handoff. So, the OEM appliances, right? So from the perspective of, I don't want to have to work with two vendors. It's almost seamless, and it's really kind of one vendor in the grand scheme of things.
Yeah, I think that's big, right? Sometimes it's not necessarily, the performance gains or the style of the hardware when people move away from 3-tier to hyperconverged infrastructure. It's, I'm just tired of groups pointing fingers at each other. I call into support and they kick me down this road and then they kick me back. And, if you've seen like it's the Spider-Man meme where it's just a bunch of Spider-Mans, pointing at each other. And, that adds hours to your time. That adds frustration. It's stressful. If you don't have to deal with it, why deal with it, right? Yeah, good stuff all around on the OEM. And then we're going to get into just kind of review, how extensive this really does get. Nutanix, again, software company, and really they make an effort to work with you and your data center. So this is where you see a lot more flexibility, and we're not going to dig into the kind of all of the intricacies of these different providers, but I think the top of mind one, right, is Cisco UCS. That's a very great server platform, a great platform for the data center. The integration there, it works fine. It's just not a formally accepted partnership, right? It's something that's more of Nutanix has gone in and validated the hardware that this runs on. They've validated the configurations. And if you want to operate with Nutanix and UCS underneath as that supporting platform, that's there. Same thing, I know we mentioned HPE already, but there are other lines of HPE. So like the ProLiant and the Apollo servers. What we talked about on the previous slide would actually be the HPE DX line, which is that like OEM partnership type appliance. But if you've got maybe Gen 9, Gen 10 that fit within the compatibility list there, right, you're still going to have some wiggle room there. So I personally can't say that I've seen a lot with KTNF servers because I don't sell abroad like that, but the ability to kind of have this flexibility I think is especially important for organizations that do have a global footprint. Maybe that's just a supply chain. We have access to these types of servers, globally, and we want to be able to have that flexibility, but still manage it from that single pane of glass and be able to have that all under Nutanix. I think this is where that third-party connection really stands out.
Yeah, I think my favorite one on the list. I mean, great call out for HPE there as well, right? So it's we do have a little bit of differentiation with HPE. Cisco UCS also up there, right? Where great servers, but just not in that relationship. The relationship is not there to have that full OEM. I think the most interesting one, every time I see this, is the class, the rugged platforms, right? So the suitcase, the rolling suitcase of Nutanix nodes. Just pack it up and throw it in the back of your car and roll out to the beach or something if you need a Nutanix cluster on the beach. I don't know. It sounds pretty cool to me. But every time I see these, I mean, it's these rugged platforms, and it looks like a Pelican case with just a handful of Nutanix servers hanging out there. So always an interesting one to see. But yeah, I mean, these are all validated, right? But the validation occurs at the Nutanix level, not necessarily at a joint vendor Nutanix level. So little different experience with these as well. Especially I can speak to the Cisco UCS one. The overall experience, while Nutanix, the software is exactly the same, the support experience can be a little bit different than from what we have on the OEM or direct with Nutanix. So it's something to call out, especially knowing that customer experience is key with these. With how simple Nutanix is, we want that full, simple customer experience. Maybe not the same on some of these that it would be elsewhere.
Yeah, no, I think experience probably plays more of a role today than it ever has, right? I don't want to spend time triaging issues, right? If you can't figure it out with Nutanix, I've always said, give yourself maybe 15, 30 minutes. If you can't figure it out on your own, call support. And you'll kind of see why that statement resonates, because they're quick, they're fast, they're knowledgeable. It makes life a lot easier, I think. And I think, that's part of the e-group focus too, is just selling something that makes life easier for our customers. I think that's the end game. So that's really it from like the different hardware offerings. Let me check real quick, make sure we don't have any questions. I don't think I've seen
no questions. I'm keeping an eye out there.
Okay,
I put a challenge out there, but nobody's accepted it yet. Nobody's going to stump us this morning, I guess.
I was gonna say it might be pretty easy to stump the sales guys, so feel free to throw them in there. But let's dig into the hypervisor, and then we'll pull up the kind of like we'll dig into the hardware configurator and walk through all the different options there. I think really the hypervisor conversation is pretty quick, to be honest, and did some throwback logos today. Just to, some of these logos are probably 15, 20 years old, but the ability to have different hypervisors, and I know there's a lot of questions on this, right? Oftentimes one of the misconceptions with Nutanix is, oh, I can run multiple hypervisors on Nutanix, and they leave it at that level. That's not quite the case, right? Nutanix, the hardware is broken down as a cluster. You can have different clusters managed all from the same pane of glass, but you cannot have multiple hypervisors on the same cluster. And
I'll call you on that one.
All right.
But it's okay. It's okay. You're technically you are correct from a workload perspective, right?
Okay. Yep.
We can go deeper in that, but to your point and where you're going with that, right? Is my cluster. If I've got my 3-node cluster, I've got I'm committing to running AHV. I'm committing to running VMware Hyper-V or Zen Server, right? So our clusters are that way. Now the little kind of skirting around that requirement, of course, with storage only nodes, right? Again, the flexibility of the platform itself with storage only nodes. I might be a VMware customer, but my storage only nodes, I don't have to license those with VMware. They're going to run AHV under the hood, but they're kind of hidden away from the cluster. They're not something that I can run workloads on. So again, to your point and your intent with the comments you were going, absolutely correct. I can run whichever flexibility or whichever flavor of hypervisor I want. But again, the platform itself gives me that flexibility across my clusters. So that's kind of one of the neat things is that Nutanix, since it is software based, right? I might be a VMware shop, and I've got a call with the customer this afternoon on this exact thing. I'm a VMware shop, but I just need more storage. So I don't necessarily want to have to, I don't need to run more VMs. I just need more storage. So we're going to talk about storage only nodes, and these storage only nodes will run AHV, even though I'm a VMware environment. So that helps me with my VMware licensing. I don't have to license the additional nodes. They're not going to run workloads, so I don't have to worry about kind of Windows licensing or any of those concepts. So again, flexibility, right? Freedom of choice. Again, I can choose my hypervisor, but even then, I'm still technically not locked in all the way.
Yeah. No, that's turns out I can stump myself. So no, good call out on the kind of that workaround there. And I have seen that's I wouldn't say that's like brand new, but that's a relatively newer concept, right? Where you're able to actually add those storage nodes to a VMware environment, but not incur the additional licensing fees. So I think that's
we've been doing storage only nodes used to be kind of had to be a specific node type, right? Now again, the flexibility, I can make any node a storage only node. But it's really great when I just need storage and I don't want to have to add capacity for compute, or memory. So, but the flexibility here, right, is key to talk about, and the fact that because this is software based, it's not hardware, right? So we have this conversation a lot around. I've got a VMware cluster, and you know what? I don't want this in my DR cluster. Can I run AHV in my DR cluster? And I might have just stolen some thunder on a future slide. I don't know. But I can do cross hypervisor, right? I can have VMware on one side and AHV on the other, right? So it allows me that flexibility to really craft my environment financially, stability, functionality, kind of how I want this to look. I'm not always locked in with one vendor, one hardware, one software solution that I have to be tied to, right? I can craft it as I want to see it go.
Yep. No, good stuff there. And I really, again, that choice, right? I mean, I don't know of any other solutions that allow you to kind of hop between, move around, and this really allows your apps and services to drive the decisions, right, at this level. It's you go to the public cloud and you don't necessarily spend the time thinking about like what hypervisor am I going to use. This gets you that much closer from an on-premises perspective where you can buy Nutanix, net new deployment, and not even think about hypervisor. You got one that comes with it. We'll help validate whether that works or not. If it doesn't say must be supported by it, sometimes it comes down to that third-party vendor, just they're more comfortable on VMware and they're just not going to support their product if it's on something else. But we've seen time and time again that that's not necessarily the case. and we've helped customers roll out AHV and helping, eliminate those licensing expenses there. So I know we're at the bottom of the hour here, 9:30. So for those of you that have to drop real quick, we're going to go ahead and let you know kind of how to get more info on the workshop that I mentioned earlier. So this is, again, a test drive. It's a great opportunity for those of you that are maybe getting your feet wet with the platform to dig in and really get some hands-on experience with Nutanix and talking about that hybrid cloud strategy. I think today most organizations are embracing public cloud in some shape or form. And so being able to kind of tie the two together, leverage the cost benefits of having that fixed infrastructure on premises, but then also being able to use the public cloud in the appropriate instance, and then marrying those two together with the software on top, we're really going to be digging into that. So if there is interest there, keep an eye out. I've got Leanne's info there. She'll be sending some follow-ups out. She can connect you with the correct sales rep over at eGroup for questions. She can help out with questions on her side. Just keep an eye out for that as a follow-up. And if you have any additional questions, feel free to reach out to her to help out, or, of course, Mike and I are available as well. But did want to call that out as we are at the bottom of the hour here. And if you've got to drop, thanks for checking in. What I was thinking of doing, Mike, was spending the additional time here trying to share my screen essentially. But did you want to talk about the kind of the public cloud integrations while I pull up the hardware navigator?
Yeah, so I think one of the cool things Nutanix has had for a while that kind of has flown under the radar is they've had public cloud integration with the traditional AOS stack for a while, right? We could kind of bunker snapshots that we took, kind of archive them out to the cloud as needed. Now, not a huge ton of functionality there, but it worked and worked well. Then we started seeing some. With the advent of Calm, right, and having blueprint capabilities for integrating on-prem kind of automation with cloud automation, right? So being able to have blueprints that target both Azure, AWS, or an on-prem cluster, and we see that kind of grow a little bit further and further. Then then we have Frame from a VDI perspective. So VDI that kind of started cloud-based, right? And if you look at Frame, only recently in the last couple of years have we gotten that on-prem structure for Frame, but we've had kind of that public cloud side. So there's been a lot of public cloud capability with Nutanix, right? As they've kind of gone from gone into that software focus where it's not just about the hardware on site. But now seeing Nutanix clusters, right? We've got Nutanix clusters on bare metal AWS servers today. And knock on wood, hopefully here in the future, we'll have Nutanix clusters on Azure, right, running bare metal. So again, we're seeing kind of that Nutanix software trend to, it's not focused at all just around what I can do on-prem, right? It's really kind of blurring the lines of what I'm doing both on-prem and in the public cloud. Really simplifying that approach for me, right? If I need those workloads one place or another, it's just in many cases it's simple as a drag or drop, or just a failover with Leap from my public cloud side to my back to my private cloud and so forth. So almost each of these products that Nutanix has from the software perspective has some level of cloud integration to it, to the public cloud, that allows me to kind of disperse my workloads both on-prem and in the cloud. And that's great to continue to see their approach there. As we see most of our organizations, most of our partners that we're working with have that type of mindset where, focusing on-prem or just focusing on the cloud is good, but it's not going to get you where the customers are going, right? And I think Nutanix is really going to where the customers are trending towards with this kind of really focusing on a hybrid cloud approach.
Yeah, that's good stuff. And I think the benefits, right, of clusters is just that better cost efficiency, and you're less constrained by per VM pricing and leveraging Nutanix software. So I would say if you're just kind of a small environment, right, like maybe not the best fit, but as you kind of scale out your infrastructure as you get larger in the public cloud, like that's when you really see some good savings there. So I'm going to go ahead and throw the link to this site. We're not going to necessarily just like screen share and read to you here about what this is, but I think this tool is actually really neat for those of you that maybe want to explore what the different configurations options are. So we'll just kind of do like a high level tour. Another thing here that you can access through this link that I just shared out is the Nutanix Sizer. So even from the perspective of like eliminating the number of times that you have to talk to salespeople like myself, right? Like Nutanix empowers you with a lot of tools that can help you actually start to build and configure workloads. And so your ability to kind of move faster, your ability to go to market faster with maybe a new product that you're building on top of Nutanix, you can predict those costs a lot more efficiently. And it also allows you to do kind of that, not necessarily just in time growth, but get away from, all right, let's kind of guesstimate where we need to be in the next 3 to 5 years, or just having to buy, hey, you know, I can only buy 12, 24, or 48 terabyte shelves. You can really kind of get into the what I like to call the Goldilocks of the solution, and you know, not too big, not too small, not too hot, not too cold. This is just right for what I need. Procure it, add it, and you're off to the races with that. So to kind of highlight real quick, just the depth of, you know, everything that you can see within the Nutanix hardware platform, I'm going to call out just what this looks like here. So to kind of what we've been talking about, right? Like, there's a lot that you can configure and a lot that you can explore with the Nutanix hardware platform sizer. And so right up here, 95 different platforms. You know, this really allows you to sort by use case as well. So let's say you've got Nutanix for your core infrastructure and you need remote branch office capable platforms, right? Hop in here. This will give you, you know, not necessarily the answer, but it gives you a good idea of what you should be looking for. And you can do so by different vendors. So again, if you do have that Hitachi contract, or maybe you are a Dell shop through and through, this will kind of help get to that answer faster. Bring it up to you know, eGroup and say, hey, we're looking at the R440 for our robo sites. Can you help us kind of fine tune this and tweak it? That conversation, like I mentioned, is a lot faster. And you know, being able to leverage this and kind of do this on your own, I think a lot of groups appreciate being able to size workloads out and find this and compare it. I mean, this is kind of like shopping online, right? I mean, we do that plenty. We've done it a ton in the past year and a half, being kind of homebound, but it really makes that experience of determining where you need to go a lot cleaner and a lot more efficient.
Yeah, one of my favorite things on this, Dan, is they've done a heck of a job really expanding this functionality out. But one of the, you can see on your screen there, you know, to talk around whether it's NX, whether it's an OEM, or whether it's that third party, they specifically will even tell you on this screen that, hey, here, you know, for example, just choose, get rid of some of yours and just choose HPE. I'm walking through this on my screen, so I'm kind of directing you to do what I want you to do. But choose just HPE and then remote office, branch office, right? And what we can see is that there's two options, right? There's two options that HPE kind of calls out here. But what I find interesting is that, you know, they're giving you the OEM option, but they're also putting out there, you know, in blue, you can see the blue kind of highlighted there, the third party. You'll see that it's field installed software, meaning that those are, you know, HPE ProLiant nodes that are coming from the factory as brand new servers, as opposed to the one on your left there that shows factory installed software, which is another ProLiant really server, right? I mean, there's no physical hardware difference between those two options, but this is a validated pre-configured DX build, meaning when you order a DX configuration, excuse me, it comes with AHV already on it, right? But the other one, I can buy a ProLiant, the one in blue, and I've got to then image the nodes myself, right? So again, there's that flexibility there. The beauty of this as well is it also allows me to some extent to repurpose my nodes, right? If I've got some decent HP ProLiant servers that are new, and if I can meet some of the hardware specs, well, I've already got the hardware on site potentially, right? You know, so that's flexibility that is built right into that platform, right? Being able to know exactly, you know, is this going to come pre-imaged? Is this going to come so, you know, where I've got to image it from scratch? And it allows me to get an idea of, hey, I've got, you know, I've got some hardware that I might be able to reuse. Let me see if I can kind of fit this in, right? And if it doesn't necessarily fit here, there's always the Nutanix Community Edition, which I can smack on old hardware and get myself a little environment out of. So again, flexibility is the key. Freedom of choice to this, you know, I think it was .next. I think it was 3 years ago now, maybe even 4. You know, the freedom of choice and all those freedoms, the hypervisor, the hardware, the software, everything that goes with it. That's the good and the bad, I guess, of Nutanix, right? I have so many choices. It's like going to Baskin Robbins. Which ice cream flavor? 31 flavors. You can't get them all. You can try, but it's one of those that it allows you to be flexible, but it gives you that choice that you want to make. So, love this stuff.
Yeah, no, this is great. And to kind of wrap things up, I know we mentioned that we would talk briefly about Supermicro. So kind of the OG, if you will, platform for Nutanix. Taking a look at this, right, there's 1000 series, 3000 series, 5000 series, 6000, 8000. So that's that first numeral that you see there on the kind of the SKU, if you will. And then the G, that's the processor. So if you've been buying Nutanix, you're probably aware of this. The last few, I think the second digit, Mike, that's the number of nodes, correct?
Second digit is always the number of nodes. Yep. So 3170 would be a 3000 series. I think it's 1 is the number of nodes. 7, I think, is the CPU type. I'm trying to remember. There's a scheme out there for each of these, and I probably just butchered that. I do know the first one is, of course, the series. Second one is the number of nodes. So if you look down there, you see like that NX 1065 G7. That's capable of 4 nodes in a chassis. So you might get a 1165, a 1265, a 1365, a 1465, depending on the number of nodes you're ordering for the solution.
Yeah. So this again, if you have any questions on the NX line, this is a great place to check it out. The ability, to your point, to customize and kind of mix and match. Sometimes the 8000 series can work, but if it's a cost exercise, maybe the 3000 series is a good fit as well. And that's something that we're always more than happy to help out with. So I think with that being said, we've kind of covered.
Here's a great example. I'm gonna hang on. So we just did one with a customer where they had 1065 nodes, the 1000 series nodes. They needed extra capacity, so we as we kind of evaluated this with them, they needed some storage and they needed some compute capacity. So we added in, I think, 5 8000 series nodes, right? And they at the same time they had some NX 1175 nodes, so smaller 1U nodes that they used in a specific environment that they were kind of moving, and so we moved those 1175 nodes into that same cluster. So I think it's 11 nodes now in one cluster that are made up of 1000 series, 8000 series, and the 1175 series, all within the same AHV cluster, right? So, and they're different generations, right? So we're able to easily with Nutanix take different hardware generations, G5, G6, G7, different hardware models, 1000, 8000, and 1175s, which have different hardware footprints and different hardware capabilities, and collapse that into the same exact cluster without really concern, right? And allows me to craft that environment as needed. So the fact that I can mix and match across generations and across hardware types within the same vendor, that's a great amount of flexibility I've got to be able to financially build my environment that matters to me, and it's not, I don't have a lot of wasted space or wasted environment.
Yeah, good stuff. Well, let's double check on the questions. I think we are good to go here. It looks like everybody
wanted to stump us.
No, I think they're just ready for the weekend and ready for the long weekend at that. So thanks again for joining us today. And if you have any questions, like I said, keep an eye out. We'll be following up with some general info, but as always, feel free to reach out to us and keep an eye out for the next Nutanix at 9 sessions. We'll be talking about all sorts of stuff. So yeah, Mike, thanks for joining as always, and look forward to talking to everybody on the next one. See ya.
Sounds good. Take care.